Ilishumi nesiphohlongo kungumsombuluko solo sikuyo inyanga yesithathu yeminyaka ba-2024 inyanga yeNdlovulenkhulu, the 18th of March 2024. It is a very good morning to you and yours lapho usibukela khona, whether you're from the Shiselweni region noma uselibonjeni ukahoho noma ukamanzini noma ngabe ke you're outside of Eswatini, whatever time it is lapho ukhona khona. It is a very good morning kuwe ngwane lomuhle. It is going to be a great show nalomhla ekuseni. Sisangena nje ehlelweni sathe moment to thank the Lord Almighty for keeping us alive over the weekend. Sibonga nje nesipho sempilo. Lomhla ekuseni lesitakhulumisa tindzaba temidlalo. Lengifuna nje kucala ngekusho ukuthi yes, we were wrong. Fabrice Msonera kuyasita ukuthi admit nangabe bo wrong. How Manchester United edged past Liverpool in a 4-3 epic win to move into the FA Cup semi-finals, I also don't know, but what a game it was at Old Trafford. The main stand was singing for the first time since 1984 is what the commentators were saying, and the last goal was Garnacho to Ahmad, 21 United, 4 Liverpool, 3 Liverpool, 4 Manchester United rather, 3 Liverpool. Wow, madness, intoxicating madness it was. Good game later. The two teams, by the way, an interesting stat that I stumbled upon: 53 shots over the course of 120 minutes of football. I make that one shot every 135 seconds. Intoxicating madness indeed. Now we bugelele game later. You got a chance to witness beautiful football. We want to talk about that game. But we were wrong with Fabrice Msonera in predicting this game. It happens, it is football. But a couple of other games as well, including Chelsea that managed to get a win. Manchester City, I think it was an obvious prediction there that it was also going to come out with a win. We also want to discuss all those games, as well as the Premier League, as well as the Nedbank Cup in South Africa, Nela Liga, Barcelona finally getting wins. And some of the interesting things that are being said about Barcelona is one day they will thank Xavi for getting so many wins, with this particular squad. You wouldn't have expected Barcelona would be winning so many games with this squad, particularly in a league with, Liverpool, Real Madrid, as well as Girona. They are still in the race. It's not looking really, really good for Barcelona, but they are still in the race at least. We want to discuss all of that with Fabrice Msonera later on the show. On the first story on the Times of Eswatini, suspected money laundering, cops freeze bank account after 4.6 million emalangeni deposited from company account and money dispersed to 36 other accounts. Bukopo claim ownership of money, says it was loans from government. Kulenye inzaba, cops stop beginning of year service for 40 churches. Inzaba kale naliqhamuka lapha eMotshane. Lapho khona kunasiya sithombe sibona a section of Christians from close to 40 churches from around Nduma Royal Crawl who converged near the main road where they were being addressed after a prayer service marking the beginning of the year was stopped by amaphoyisa Eswatini Laitolo. Kuthiwa some of the police officers who had come to ensure that the prayer service does not go ahead. One of the churches that was locked as Christians went to attend the prayer service. 2 kids kidnapped, a relative wanted. There's a cholera risk as 91 out of 242 Matsapa homes have toilets. UK agency here to recruit more nurses, making the last leading story on the front page. The leading story there. Sihlangu Semnikati Stars left out of Morocco trip. Junior and 6 others are left out. Coach Dominic says players' commitment made it hard for him to select the best. Players and technical team before departing for Morocco via OR Tambo International Airport, Eswatini Laitolo. So a proposal to play both legs in Morocco have been rejected as the Eswatini Football Association President Peter Samora Simelane revealed that they had turned down a proposal from Somalia which suggested that the two legs should be played in Morocco. Teams to be accountable for damages. Gasomhlolo, the Premier League of Eswatini Chief Executive Officer Kenneth Makanya, has announced that teams will be charged for any damage caused to Somhlolo Stadium. On another story, on the international front, in the FA Cup quarter-final, Manchester United beat Liverpool in Classic. 4-3 score kuleyo game leyo sitayixoxisa kabanti kutemidlalo. Sundowns into Nedbank Cup quarters nanayo lekhona ukuthi iphumelele kule mphela sonto. Sitaqhubeka sibuke liphepha iEswatini Observer making the leading story there. There's a search party for teens killer. Men suspected to have kidnapped, raped and gruesomely murdered teenager spotted by two people yesterday morning. Kuyathembisa ukuthi utawutholakala loyo lo suspectwa ukuthi ukidnap waphinda wadlwengula nangiya umphana lo lapha esithombeni. Another one, indigenous chicken. Bishop Nash of Divine Healing Ministries displays inkukhu yakhe yasemakhaya. Presented by Pastor Musa Ngampalala of Nkambeni branch and the brethren. It is fit for a bishop. This was during the bishop's visit to the branch for a special service yesterday. Headline worthy? I don't know. Cholera threat in Gwaluseni is another story. No spouses for nurses in the United Kingdom. Eswatini Observer. Sihlangu send off. But again, do not lose. That's the message for Sihlangu as they leave for Morocco. The game will be played on Wednesday. Coach says the team is ready for this game. Minister of Sports, Culture and Youth Affairs Bongani Nzima has encouraged Sihlangu players to represent the country well and beat Somalia in the AFCON qualifiers match. On another 121st minute winner decides Classic FA Cup quarter-final for Manchester United as they managed to edge past Liverpool in what was a blockbuster match, probably the match of the weekend. PLE CEO's contract is under review. The Premier League of Eswatini Chief Executive Officer Kenneth Makanya's contract is currently being reviewed, and that's according to reports where a task team named HR Committee headed by Charles Matsebula has been appointed to review the contract as well as the performance of the CEO. Eswatini Daily News, Tihlogoletamba Mbili on the front page. 7-day ultimatum for Minister Neil as they have to pay micro projects 100 million as the finance ministry. The Minister of Finance has been instructed to pay micro projects a sum of 100 million emalangeni. That is going to be in the next 7 days. The recommendation was made by the Ministry of Finance Portfolio Committee, which is chaired by Firebrand Member of Parliament for Lobamba Lomzala Inkundla Mawik Kumalo. On another one, Prime Minister jets out, makes landmark visit to Taiwan. Infracrust pumps over 140,000 emalangeni worth of access control facilities for Philani Maswati home. Letihamba embili ephepheni iEswatini Daily News kanti-ke kutemidlalo khona 9 Sihlangu players dropped and left in lurch, forced to hitchhike home. And a very painful experience. EFA turns down Somalia's absurd proposal. Ekuthatheni onke ema games adlalelwe khona eSomalia. Isike EFA it's kanti-ke Bok captaincy will depend on racing 92 mabhokobhoko lawo South Africa la sathi-ke the captaincy will depend on racing 92. Those are the leading headlines this morning with Batsabeni Live. Lesikhathi sitaba hlola imakethe sitabuya sibuka itindzaba teSwati. Asibukela tindzaba tesiswati kwalomuhle nangabe usanza kusijoyina siyakuvusela nawe asithabele nathi tindzaba. Umhlonishwa Mvunankhulu Russell Dlamini usuke kuleli esukweni la idolo ekseni walibhekisa eveni le-Taiwan ngekumenywa nguhulumende walela live loholwa ngumengameli Dr. Tsai Ing-wen. Asese-Taiwan Mvunankhulu kubhekeke ukuthi avakashele emahhovisi alonxusele live lakangwane kulela live. Ngazike utawuphindze abambe tinkhulumo nebaholi benkampani i-Taiwan Engineering Consultants. Mvunankhulu kubhekeke ukuthi abambe tinkhulumo nelisekela lamengameli welive le-Taiwan Dr. William Ching. Ngazike utawuphindze avakashele inyuvesi i-Taipei Medical University kanye naletinye tinkampani tahulumende talela live letifaka ekhatsi i-Disaster Reduction Center. Mvunankhulu utawuphetsa luhambo lwakhe ngekubamba tinkhulumo namengameli we-Taiwan Dr. Tsai Ing-wen. Qhubeka nato tindzaba ayikachubeki-ke inkonzo yekucala kweminyaka emotshane emphakathi yenduma njengoba bekumenyetiwe. Kanti-ke bazalwane bagcine bathandaza emgwacweni njengoba indlunkulu kuthiwe ayikake ibite bazalwane enkonzweni yemthandazo.
Bazalwane bemabandla langaphansi kwemphakathi wasenduma emotshane bahlangene kulomphakathi ngelisondo ekseni kutawukhonda endlunkulu njengesimemetelo lesikhishwe emsakatweni wemoya. Kepha bathi nabefika abazalwane bahlangabetwa ngumbutho wembubo enesive egedeni bababikela ukuthi bathole umbiko lothi le nkonzo ingabi khona kulomphakathi. Kanti sicocisene nasihlalo welikomiti lemabandla lomphakathi Joseph Mabuza lochaza kabandi.
Inkonzo beyihleliwe ukuthi namhla itaba khona umphakathi ke wahamba yakuntaba zabantu kwamenyetela inkonzo kwaphuma emsakadweni ukuthi inkonzo ikhona. Salungisa ke nathi seta lapha nje sifike ekseni nakoshaya 7 nasifika la kufika emaphoyisa bathi inkonzo ngeke iqhubeke. Sabuda kwendeja bathi ke hayi bathole i-order nabo ukuthi le nkonzo ingaqhubeki ngoba akusiyo inkonzo yesondo political. Samangala lethini ukuthi yini le vele babe bancanza ke nebantu ke labaningi imoto yelithende nje bayijikise khona amaphoyisa sayisho.
Ibandla letindzaba talomsakato liphindze lahlala phansi lacocisana nalobukela umphakathi umfana Nkosi Salaphi lovedile ukuthi kude indlunkulu lekwatiko ngale nkonzo. Kanti bazalwane babese babamba umthandazo emgwacweni bacula wathandaza umfundisi Clement Mahlaba welibandla le-Assemblies of God emotshane.
Babe wethu longcwele egameni lika Jesu Kristu siyabonga. uNkulunkulu lokhona, uNkulunkulu lowethembekile. Nangetikhathi letinje uNkulunkulu lobonako. Siyabonga nawuthe evini lakho akuthandazele bonke bantu. Kuthandazelwe nebuholi. Kuze sitohlala kahle ngekuthula. Babe wawusho into longayiphuthati. Kodwa wawusho into yekuthi kuthula kuvela kuNkulunkulu. Siyathandaza Nkosi nakunayi umphakathi wethu nakulommango wethu wonke. Siyacela Nkosi ungenelele ngoba uNkulunkulu wekuthula wena.
Libeseke liyachitheka libandla njengoba umbutho wembubo enesive usonzele kubo wabacela ukuthi abakhweshe kulendzawo. Etindzabeni Eswatini TV kubika Samkelsiwe khoza ngina LinkedIn Gule emotshane.
Uphiko lwaka-micro projects lonyaka litawengeta luhlelo lolutawubuka tindzaba tekuletha imandi lahlobile emimangweni nekuhlandeka. Lokho-ke kuvetwe ngumcondzisi waloluphiko Sibusiso Mbingo ngesikhathi i-micro projects yethula tebetebe emphakathi wasekuvinjelweni lobite imali lengu-1.5 million emalangeni.
Lo tebetebe wakhiwe ngaphansi kwehlelo lelichutshwa liphiko lwaka-micro project nenhlangano bafundzi bemakolishi lababonjinela belive lemelika i-Engineers in Action lolicale ngeminyaka wa-2017. Akhuluma ngesikhathi loluphiko lwetfula lo tebetebe lowatiwa ngekabodali footbridge. Umcondzisi waloluphiko Sibusiso Mbingo uthi lonyaka baluphiko batawengeta lolunye futhi lihlelo lokuletha imandi lahlobile emimangweni nekuhlandeka.
Here we're expanding. We're not only focusing on footbridges, but we're also entering into a new program which will be underwater and sanitation. We are here today to celebrate the 22nd bridge Summary is very basic. We have combined or we've married with Engineers in Action to help in change people's lives.
Lilunga lephalamende lenkundla yaseNgaba Hope Shiba uthi imisebenzi lenjengalena ithuthukisa live iphindze ibuse isifundisa hulumende.
Sibonga labo lababa nalomqondo bekuthi bahlanganise kukhuluma ukuthi yathi siyahlupheka la sijika le masifuna kudala ngesheya phindze futhi kwenteka netingoti bese bakha lesicelo. Simbongeke kakhulu naye micro project na Engineers in Action kubambisa ingwenyama kuhulumende wayo ukuthi ubonakala ehulumende usebenta kubuye sifundi sakhe ehulumende welive la Kangwane.
Lo tebetebe utawusita sive lesingetulu kwetinkulungwane letine kanti ubite sigidzi nencenye semalangeni 1.5 million emalangeni. Etindzabeni Eswatini TV kubika Samkelisiwe Khoza nginabheka imazibuko eMochane.
Sive sendzawo yaseMpholi ngaphansi kwenkhundla yaseludzeludze sesitawukhona kutfutfukisa tinhlangothi letahlukene letfaka ekhatsi yemabhizinisi njengoba-ke sekuya ngasemaphetselweni kufakwa kwelitiyela kulomgwaco. Lomgwaco wakhiwa liphiko lwaka-micro projects kanti utawubita imali elinganiselwa ku-12.8 million emalangeni.
Luphiko lwaka-micro project kulomsebenzi libambisene nenkampani yaka-AG Thomas kanti ucala eminyakeni lophelele ngenyanga yenhlaba. Njinela wemigwaco ka-micro project semi-minor uthi lo mgwaco lesigaba lesingu-3.4 kilometers utawubita 12.8 million emalangeni njengoba betame kunciphisa tindleko ngekusebentisa lesive kulokunye.
We got 3 Texas. We got asphalt, the one we are doing today. We got concrete where we are, and we got terracrates. Those are 3 things that we are trying to do to see whether we can reach everybody. Basically, we have noticed the model is working very well. It's also a cost saving, and we want to reach as many communities as we can. The project is costing us about 12 point something million, about 12.8 million, because it's at 3.4 kilometers in length.
Sihlalo welikomiti lentuthuko kulendzawo Colin Chabalala uthi lo mgwaco bongahambeki kwakhiwa kwawo kuletha intuthuko lekhonsako kulommango.
Ngelendlela besudzinga ngayo bengazi ukuthi igolide besikudzinga as igolide, you know, one who look for igolide. But lokumcoka ngalokuthi nawuthi uyabuka nje even you know amabhizinisi lamancane lafaka ekhathi ema-groceries lafaka ekhathi you know labalima tingathi they'll be able to ukuthi bahambise timpahla tabo very quick bathole labakudzingako very quick ibhizinisi ihambe faster that way.
Lo mgwaco kubheke ukuthi ube uphelile sive siwusebenzise emavikini lamabili letako. Etindzabeni Eswatini TV kubika Samkelisiwe Khoza na LinkedIn kule eludzeludze.
Sihlalo welikomiti lelibuke intfutfuko ku-Ward 12 eMbabane Thulani Magagula. Uthi-ke umsebenzi wabo balikomiti kubambisana namasipala kude kutfutfukiswe tindzawo letikuleli wadi. Magagula uthi takhamiti takumalagwane tinesifiso lesikhulu sekugcine tisekelwe tindzawo. Nguloyo naloyo akagcine-ke anesitandi sakhe. Magagula uthi lokhu kutawenta ukuthi kutfutfuka kwalendzawo kube melula kanti-ke bekakhuluma ngesikhathi kuchubeka umhlangano wekukhetsa likomiti kuleli wadi.
Kulandzela umhlangano wekubeka kwemalunga lamasha elikomiti lentuthuko ka-Ward 12 eMbabane, loyo losabiyele kuba ngusihlalo Thulani Magagula uchaza ngalolu banjiswano lolukhona emkhatsini kwamasipala waseMbabane kanye naleli komiti la ka-Ward 12.
Malagwane indzawo lesolo kungakasikwa. So-ke sizama kona lokuthi sikhulumisane namasipala ukuthi kusikwe la umuntu abe nesitandi sakhe njengoba solo asikhoni ukuthuthuka siyembili ngale enzaba ukuthi solo semiswa ukuthi kube khona lesikwendako kunemthetho lowashaywa la edolobheni kulama informal settlement lekuthiwa i-building ban shothi kumiswa ukuthi kungaba khona lokwendako. So-ke siyezama-ke ukuthi sikhulumele lesive ukuthi agcina sikile emasipala nguloyo naloyo muntu abe nenzawo latawati ukuthi lana vele seyindzawo yami seyibita mine akhone kwenda noma ngayini la ifunayo. Kuningi kakhulu msakati ngoba na ubuka nje la ngendasi nje na ungahamba ubhekele esikolweni kune structure lapha lesakhiwako lebe sizama singimango ukuthi mane sibe nasetco wethu. So ke siyaqabanga ukuthi njoba selisibandla sikhethiwe nandunankulu uShido ukuthi akube khona ngwe nathi ke sitawuzama ukuthi sithi ngwe ukuthi siphele le structure takhamuti takumalagwane titongena lapha tende imisebenzi yetandla tokhona ukudiphilisa.
Makakula wephethe ngekuveta ukuthi kusetawuthatha isikhathi nemali kude intuthuko ilethwe ngalokuphelele kaWard 12, kepha-ke batimisele kubambisana naye masipala ekuyiletheni le ntuthuko. Kubika Phokuhle Dlamini etindzabeni te-Eswatini TV ngiZembabane.
Litiko letekuvakashana kongiwa kwemvelo libambisene namhla buhlangene solo liyachubeka nelucwaningo lwe-Climate Action Vision 2050 loluqale kule nyanga lesetulu. Umcondzisi weluhlangothi lwesimo selitulu Dudu Nhlengethwa uthi inhloso yalo lucwaningo kufuna likhambi lokele kulwa netimo letihambisana nekuguquguquka kwesimo selitulu phindze kuqiniswe netinhlangothi letawuletha intuthuko lekhonsako. Nhlengethwa uthi sive sibonakala sineshisekelo lenkhulu yekuveta imivo yaso kulolu cwaningo.
Lese kukhona ke inyalo ukuthi while sicale ngalama NDCs kufuneka ukuthi sithi siwenda lama NDCs sikhamba ngalabo 5 years but sibe sinawo umgomo wale long term ukuthi sithi siyakwatisa ukuthi no globally kukhona ukuthi sithi by 2050 as a globe we want to reach net zero. Ngabe thina sindivele sithi sibandisa kanjani umhlaba kulelo hlangothi. Nyalo ke sibuke ukuthi asivulele onke emaswati ukuthi nawe bekangaphi indlela leyo ngibopele bekiwe asho ukuthi wona abukeke ukuthi besinga yaphi ngiphi inhlangothi lakade labona ukuthi masingadiqinisa singakhona ukugcina both emvaleni yokunciphisa ema-emissions kwakheni i-resilience yethu ukuthi sisakwenda konke sikhona ukuchubeka nentuthuko. Mhlawumbe lenyelo engingakusho ukuthi sisasebenza lenzaba ye-mitigation ne-adaptation kunemucu wesithathu nawo lomcuka kakhulu umcuka kakhulu emaveni lasathuthuka na-7 lawo emaswati lokhu ngile-sustainable development. So sikubuka konke kanye ukuthi sisanciphisa intuthu tethu kufuna siphinde sakhe indlela yokuthi sikhone ukumelana nale simo kha konke sikwende kuhambisana nentuthuko lekhosakho.
Takhamiti taku-Ward 3 edolobheni kaManzini seticele masipala wakaManzini ukuthi acinise tekuphepha lisathuthuka-ke leli dolobha. Kanti masipala uhlanganise takhamiti taka-Ward number 3 utawuva imivo yesive ngaphansi kweluhlelo lwentuthuko i-Integrated Development Plan ngelisonto.
Inhloso yalo mhlangano weluhlelo lwentuthuko ukuthuthukisa lidolobha ngekuhlangana nesive nalabasebentisana nelidolobha lokungama-stakeholders. Losabambe kuba ngumphathi welidolobha lakaManzini Sizwe Dlamini uthi lidolobha liyabasekela kakhulu bosomabhizinisi labancane phindze-ke libathuthukisa ngetindlela letahlukene. Uthi nemadladla lanaka bantfwana kuleli dolobha masipala uyawanaka ngekudla mihla le.
Make sure ukuthi kuje umuntu losalela ngokuva kusendayo mhlawumbe ithuba lakho ayibe inclusive akwenza ukuthi lomunye unjinela umuntu omnyaka nje unjani ufuna ibe inclusive angeke emanzini athuthuke nesitakho kuphela ufuna phinda athuthuke quality of life yaso
sivekena naso sibeke kanjena ngemuva kokuthi akhulume lobambe kuba ngumphathi welidolobha.
Besingacela lokuthi basakhele police station kungabi police post because ema-surroundings semaningi kakhulu nalesive futhi siyathuthuka.
Besingacela kulama capital projects namane nisibukele nangomgwaco lapha Italy's Road angathi lelo Herald Gate lelo tawufika ushayise kule commercial center lomgwaco le site le dolobha lelo is the oldest but it's been neglected. Sicela nje ukuthi nakungathiwa kulama capital projects sesifakwe nathi lapha ese Herald Gate na Italy's Road in terms of lokutharisha kwalomgwaco.
Siyambonga masipala uyasikolekela tibi kunetibi lenhleti nato iminyaka.
Ngacela kuncoma lo ukuthi vele masipala ayibuke kakhulu indzaba yemgwaco ikakhulu la ihlangana khona umgwaco na ubuka nje lapha na ubheka ngaseNazarini kunema potholes lamanengi kanti semncane futhi lomgwaco.
Masipala uhlose ukuthuthukisa isigaba sesibili se-Autism Center lekhona kaManzini nekusikeke lidolobha litimbandzakanye etinhlelweni tentuthuko ikakhulukati tekonga imvelo kulokunye. Etindzabeni kubika Giyani Msibi naphiwa kuhle Dlamini kaManzini.
Inhlangano yebantfu labasha baseNkwene, Inkwene Youth Charity Organisation seyinikelele mkhulu Douglas Khumalo waseSalem ngekudla. Azike labantu labasha batsinzeke kakhulu mabeva ngesimo samkhulu.
Labantfu labasha baseNkwene batsinzeka kakhulu emphefumulweni nabeva kutsi mkhulu Khumalo wasekwenzeni kulela laseSalem esifundzeni saseshiselweni akanabane futhi akanalutho kude nalongamsita. Babeseke bahlanganisa tandla ngalokuncane lebanako bamtsengela kudla kodwa yalale yadlile. Thobile Simelane wayokele inhlangano umcelela lusito lomuntu lomdzala.
Sithena siva inhlaba mkhosi ngesimo samkhulu Khumalo. Nathi sahlanganisa lokho lebesingakuhlanganisa nebantfu labasha sasesesitoveta kumkhulu. Ingakho nje namhla sila simlethele lokudla. Kungaba kucela iziveni njengoba sikhanzile ukuthi isimo asisiso lesihle kahle, mkhulu ulala ebaleni.
Make Gwebu longumakhelwane wamkhulu Khumalo naye uhamba kulawo magama uhlaba inyanzeleyo esiveni.
Besicela Nkosi yami simane nimside kakhulu, nisicelele nakulaba nalaba nisicelele ukuze lolu sito lufinyelele kufika kuyo.
Mkhulu ubonga kakhulu ngalakwendelwe ngulabantu labasha njengoba sewutawukhona kulala agojotisile etiko.
Lapha mina ngingumuntu lengingaveli nakubantu, ngingakwazi ukukhuluma nabantu kuze lokhu nje sengikuqile konke lapha kuphinda kukhula kakhulu.
Ayitekwa-ke yendlu yalomuntu lomdzala njengoba akwahluki nani nekuthi ulala ngaphandle lekungambeka-ke engotini kulokunengi kufaka ikhatsi timvula, tinyoka nekugula nje. Uthi-ke Magundvane sewahlela nawo ayamgalakija mihla le uteke nemandla ekuwashaya lawo Magundvane. Etindzabeni kubika Giyani Msibi kanti tithombe tichamuka enhlanganweni Inkwene Youth Charity Organisation.
Salufike emaphethelweni lovakasho lolwatiwa nge-Triland Operators and Media Excursion lochutshwa-ke ngemabandla etekuvakasha emave amathathu lekuyiningizimu Afrika, i-Eswatini kanye neMozambique. Loluvakasho luphethe ngesidlo sakusihlwa ehhotela lase-Happy Valley ezulwini ngemgcibelo kusihlwa.
Lolu hambo luqale mhla tilishumi kulesetulu eMpumalanga. Lwachubekela-ke eveni laseMozambique lokhu seluphetsela lapha eSwatini. Ngemgcibelo kusihlwa bashila neligwayi bacoca kabanti labasebenta kunakativakashi lesingathi ngema-tour operators nama-tour guides nekuthi-ke batawusebenzisana njani kulobudlelwane lobuhle nakangaka. Chonke Dlamini lophethe tekumaketha ebandleni letekuvakasha kuleli uthi kunengi labakufundzile solokucale lolu vakasho.
Lokho ke namhla kusihla sesila sikubita ngekuthi networking speed networking session lapho khona ema-tour operators akangwane ahlangene na-South Africa la khona batoshelana ligwayi njengoba wati ukuthi Triland siyimaketha ngemavela amathathu kuna Eswatini kuna Mozambique kuna Mpumalanga. Sithi-ke kula ma-tour operators aseswatini nase-South Africa akashelana ligwayi akhone kupackager le Triland route siya collaborate kanye kungasiko kuphela ama-tour operators ne-media nayo imcoko ngoba phela niyo leveta titfombe letinhle ngalama destinations. Sibabonile nje bamakethe Mozambique, bamakethe Eswatini, bamakethe neMpumalanga kumcwa kakhulu. So namhla ebusuku nje sitohlanganele lokho ukuthi selipholile langa asesihlaleni phasishela neligwayi ba exchange ama business cards bathi ukuthi uma ngabe ngifuna tekangwane ngathinta abani lalabo laba South Africa nabasuka emaswada kangwane angathinta abani kumcwa kakhulu Giyani njengoba wathi ukuthi ke sine target yethu ya 2027 2 million visitors 2 billion receipts.
Budlelwano kulamave lamathathu buyagcina kutekuvakasha nekumaketha live ngelive njengesivumelwano lesasayinwa. Konke lokhu kwentelwa ukuthi tekuvakasha tithuthuke kulamave inganike tike tatsikameteka impela nakunemkhuhlane we-COVID-19. Etindzabeni ngeNgiyani Msibi kunalingithini Gule eHappy Valley ezulwini.
Kutemidlalo mengameli wenhlangano lengamele umdlalo webhola lapha eveni Peter Simelana uthi baphathi balenhlangano basalile ngesicelo selive laseSomalia ukuthi imilende lemibili yekuhlungela indzebe ye-AFCON ibe ngiledlalelwa yonke eMorocco njengoba ke lokho bekutovimba abalandzeli ekutheni bangakhoni kuyawubukela lelikhethelo emlenteni wesibili lokungumdlalo wasekhaya waso Sihlangu. Simelana bekhuluma uma kuvaleliswa likhethelo lesive leliyodlala neSomalia eveni leMorocco. Asitephethe ngaleyo ndzaba leyo tekucala tindzaba lomuhla sibahlole emakethe sitabuya sichubeka nehlelo.
Kude lesinye isikhathi ngaphandle kwalesi
aba research bafunze.
Being risky means ukuthi nalokuwa kwayo kulula.
Nathi kufuna sente ukukhicita lokhu kusembili.
Welcome back. The special envoy of the Secretary General for Yemen, Hans Grandberg, on the 14th of March told the Security Council that while hopes and expectations for an agreement on a nationwide ceasefire, as well as measures to improve living conditions in Yemen have not been met, efforts in finalizing and implementing a United Nations roadmap remain undeterred.
Mr. President, we had hoped and the Yemenis had expected that by this Ramadan we would have had an agreement on a nationwide ceasefire and measures to improve living conditions in Yemen. I had hoped I would be briefing you about the preparations for an inclusive political process. Public sector employees across the country should have been receiving their salaries and pensions. Oil exports should have resumed, which could have enabled more effective service delivery and improved economic conditions. And we should have had another agreement on the release of prisoners, allowing loved ones to return home in time for Ramadan. While these hopes and expectations have not, to date, been met, our efforts in finalizing and implementing a United Nations roadmap remain undeterred. I believe that Yemenis share my impatience in achieving these aspirations. However, as I briefed last month, the mediation space has grown more complex. This continues to be the case. Although we have tried to shield the peace process from regional developments since the war in Gaza, the reality is, and allow me to repeat myself, that what happens regionally impacts Yemen, and what happens in Yemen can impact the region. Since November of last year, Nasrallah has been targeting vessels in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. And in response, since January, the United States and United Kingdom have struck military targets in Nasrallah-controlled areas. Last week, Nasrallah attacked a bulk carrier in the Gulf of Aden, killing and wounding several crew members. Another vessel that Nasrallah recently struck, the Rubimar, left an oil slick and has now sunk in the Red Sea along with her cargo. Regrettably, the current trajectory gives cause for serious concern. The longer the escalatory environment continues, the more challenging Yemen's mediation space will become. With more interests at play, the parties to the conflict in Yemen are more likely to shift calculations and alter their negotiation agendas. In a worst-case scenario, the parties could decide to engage in risky military adventurism that propels Yemen back into a new cycle of war. Therefore, allow me to emphasize the importance of remaining focused on the long-term aims that we are seeking to achieve in Yemen. In order to protect progress on the peace process, I urge all those involved to exercise maximum restraint and work towards de-escalation. With the Red Sea now part of a wider set of concentric circles of escalation, I also reiterate the Secretary General's warning about the risk of further spillover of the Gaza conflict across the region and his recent calls for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. Inside Yemen, although hostilities have remained at relatively low levels compared to pre-2022 truce period, We have seen continued clashes and troop movements in Hodeida, Lahej, Marib, Sada, Shabwa, and Taiz. The parties also continue to make public threats to return to war. Many Yemenis I have spoken to have expressed their fears of a potential escalation in internal fighting. We must do all we can to prevent this, and my office continues to engage the parties on the need to maintain calm at the front lines. Amid the regional turmoil, Mr. President, my work continues to be guided by the priorities articulated by Yemenis for Yemen, and my focus remains on reaching a ceasefire and starting a political process. This is the only way to resolve the conflict in Yemen. Over the past few months, my office and I have consulted with Yemenis from all walks of life, and they have talked about what they have lost, what peace means for them, and how they think we should get there. One thing we have heard consistently across the board is that their needs and priorities have not changed since this recent regional escalation. They have only grown more urgent. Therefore, my mediation efforts can focus on engaging the parties to bridge gaps and identify ways to initiate the ceasefire, improve living conditions, and start a political process, building off the commitments they made in December. As part of this effort, my office has convened meetings in recent weeks with key security officials in Aden and Taiz to prepare for a future nationwide ceasefire. It is imperative that all parties keep channels of communication open and do not lose focus on delivering results for Yemenis. Mr. President, International Women's Day this month was a reminder of the disproportionate impact of conflict on women in Yemen and of the importance of enabling their meaningful participation in the peace process. The conflict has exacerbated gender inequalities, restricting women's access to education, healthcare, and freedom of movement. Imposed guardianship requirements further curtail women's agency and participation in peace efforts. My office is continuing its partnership with UN Women to hold consultations with civil society, women political leaders, human rights activists, and representatives of marginalized groups. Through these consultations, we aim to prioritize the voices and experiences of local communities, particularly Yemeni women. Last month, my office also held a 3-day consultative meeting with 30 civil society men and women activists from diverse governorates discussing their priorities and visions for the peace process and ideas on how to make UN negotiation more inclusive. We are also closely following and encouraging local mediation efforts. In recent weeks, thanks to the relentless advocacy and work of Yemeni civil society and local mediators, we have seen renewed attention on the need to open roads that were closed during the conflict. The opening of the Haifan Road in Taiz Governorate is a step in the right direction. I am encouraged that the parties are giving renewed attention to the issue of roads. However, more needs to be done to prevent incidents and improve coordination between the parties. I urge them to prioritize the collective interests of Yemenis over narrow gains and to seize this opportunity to meet Yemenis' expectations regarding the sustainable opening of main roads across Yemen. Supporting the freedom of movement of people and goods across Yemen remains a priority for my office, and we stand ready to assist the parties as needed. I hope that by the time we meet again next month, there is more positive news to share in this regard. Mr. President, I have continued working with regional actors, including the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the Sultanate of Oman, who play a crucial role in supporting my mediation efforts. Yemen has also been fortunate to have long benefited from the unity of the UN Security Council in supporting a political process under UN auspices. I am grateful that all international stakeholders I have engaged with continue to assure me of their steadfast support to my efforts and to the resolution of the conflict. I will need this concerted backing to ensure strong and consistent signaling to the parties on the need to engage with the peace process. And I will rely on your collective diplomatic action to help me steer the mediation process through the current regional turmoil.
Let's look now to a briefing on the humanitarian situation where the Director of Operations and Advocacy at Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, Idem Wosonu, said for most people in Yemen, food insecurity is an issue of affordability. It is not about accessibility.
Mr. President, positive progress observed since the UN brokered truce in April 2022 is at risk of unraveling. Levels of food insecurity and malnutrition have surged in recent months, posing a real and increasing threat to the lives and well-being of millions of people, particularly women and children. Recent assessments by UNICEF and the World Food Programme showed an 11% increase in food insecurity since November last year, the highest levels for 16 months in Houthi-controlled areas, and that nearly half of all children under the age of 5 are experiencing moderate to severe stunting, a 4 percentage point increase compared to 2022, and more than double the global stunting prevalence. More than half of the families surveyed reported inadequate food consumption levels. The causes are familiar: conflict, a protracted economic crisis, and increasingly severe funding shortfalls, which are significantly impacting humanitarian assistance. In government-controlled areas, the number of people receiving aid and the size of food rations have had to be reduced. As we previously told the Council, the World Food Programme paused general food assistance in Houthi-controlled areas in November, while it continued discussions with the Houthi de facto authorities on who to prioritize for assistance. Following an allocation by the Emergency Relief Coordinator of $7 million from the Central Emergency Response Fund to the World Food Programme, an agreement on commencing a pilot retargeting exercise in Houthi-controlled areas has been reached. Based on the success of this pilot and subject to availability of funding, a broader resumption of food distributions will take place. As a result, 9.5 million people who have not received assistance since November 2023 could be reached. Over the past 5 months, WFP's overall requirement is $230 million to cover 3 food distribution cycles for the most vulnerable families in Houthi-controlled areas. We urge donors to step in with this much-needed immediate funding. Mr. President, for most people in Yemen, food insecurity is an issue of affordability, not accessibility. As people in Yemen very clearly told me when I visited governorates of Aden, Sana'a, and Amran last week, they want sustainable solutions to the causes of their humanitarian needs and the opportunity to define for themselves how to rebuild their futures. In Ash-Sha'ab displacement site in Aden, I spoke with Sadia, with Juma'a, with Saada, with Sumaya, and Shahra, mothers, breadwinners, and change makers in their communities. They shared with me their hopes to start businesses in Bahur, which is perfume and incense making, to take control of their lives for themselves and their families. As Special Envoy Grunberg said, as we celebrate International Women's Day this month, I am awed by their drive, their determination, and their resilience. These sustainable solutions we discussed go far beyond what humanitarians can be expected to provide. It is now more important than ever that the international community gets behind the UN's development framework for Yemen to enable the people of Yemen to break the cycle of dependence on external assistance and help them build a robust, self-reliant, and sustainable economy, just like the women I met mentioned to me. Livelihoods and job creation are the central pillars of this development framework, prioritizing support for groups at the highest risk of being left behind, including women and girls. Mr. President, distinguished delegate members of the Council, rising regional tensions, as mentioned, and the escalating situation in the Red Sea are further factors threatening the modest economic improvements and humanitarian progress made following the UN brokered truce in April 2022 and the subsequent cessation of hostilities. Attacks against vessels such as Ruby Ma, as the Special Envoy has said, could have direct and indirect impacts on the livelihoods of thousands of people in coastal communities that rely on fishing for survival. This incident illustrates the substantial risks posed by growing escalation in and around Yemen. We have also received a number of unverified reports of civilian casualties stemming from Houthi attacks on vessels, as well as airstrikes in Yemen. We again reiterate the United Nations Secretary General's call for full compliance with Security Council Resolution 2722. We urge all parties, all concerned parties, to comply with international law and refrain from actions that could exacerbate the situation. Mr. President, I also want to reiterate the importance of full humanitarian access to people in need in Yemen. Following several cancellations by the Houthi de facto authorities, we welcome the resumption of flights to Marib. We continue to advocate for the lifting of bureaucratic impediments and restrictions on staff movements, particularly the movement of Yemeni female staff throughout the country. Mr. President, the people of Yemen can ill afford to see the progress made since the UN-brokered truce ebb away, nor can they afford the disaster and deprivations that could come with a further escalation in the conflict. I appeal to you as members of the Council to do everything you can to support de-escalation and peace efforts for the people of Yemen, including, as mentioned by Special Envoy Grunberg, women-led initiatives. I also ask you to continue using all diplomatic means to support and facilitate a principled humanitarian response in Yemen and to maintain unity for all those working tirelessly to serve those in need despite the dangers. Lastly, we appeal to donors to provide the urgent financial support required to tackle food insecurity and other pressing humanitarian needs, as well as livelihood support. This remains a lifeline for the people of Yemen, and we depend on the timeliness of this funding.
The Middle East, Khaled Kiari, who is the Assistant Secretary General for the Middle East, Asia and the Pacific at the Department of Political and Peace-Building Affairs, as well as Peace Operations, told the Security Council that the past 2 weeks have been instead witnessed an intensification of attacks on civilians across different regions of Ukraine, while strikes have also been reported inside the Russian Federation, including today in the Belgorod region, reportedly leading to casualties.
Members of the Security Council, 2 weeks ago, the Secretary General joined this council in marking 2 years since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, launched in blatant violation of the UN Charter and international law. On this grim milestone, we heard a loud and clear message from the broad membership of the organization. The escalatory trajectory of this war and its enormous human costs are unsustainable and dangerous, particularly for Ukrainian civilians. In this Council and at the General Assembly, we heard numerous urgent calls for de-escalation, peace and respect for the principle of the UN Charter. However, the past 2 weeks have instead witnessed an intensification of attacks on civilians across different regions of Ukraine. Strikes have also been reported inside the Russian Federation, including today in the Belgorod region, reportedly leading to casualties. Regrettably, our repeated calls for protection of civilians appear to fall on deaf ears. Mr. President, the Ukrainian Black Sea port city of Odessa has become a frequent target of missile and drone attacks in recent days and weeks, with deadly consequences. 2 days ago, a Russian missile strike hit Odessa, reportedly killing 5 people and wounding several. Further drone attacks were reported last night. On Saturday, 2 March, 12 people were reportedly killed in a drone attack on an apartment block. 5 of those killed were children, making it the deadliest incident for children in more than 9 months. This heartbreaking incident followed 2 consecutive nights of drone attacks on 22nd and 23rd February that claimed the lives of 4 people. Since February 2022, Odessa, an important hub for Ukrainian agriculture exports, has also suffered repeated strikes on its infrastructure. The cultural heritage sites on the city have not been spared. Odessa is far from being the only Ukrainian city under constant fire. In recent days, civilian casualties have been reported in Kharkiv, Donetsk, Sumy, and Zaporizhzhia regions of Ukraine. Last night, 2 people were reportedly killed as a result of missile attacks on the city of Kupiansk in the Kharkiv region. Yesterday afternoon, a reported Russian missile strike on the city of Sumy injured 1 civilian, damaged the central city hospital and the region's emergency medical center. These are only a few of the recent incidents. We are particularly concerned by the reports that the fighting is spreading to new residential areas in the east of Ukraine. Throughout this war, fighting that came to Ukrainian villages, towns, and cities led to complete or near-complete destruction at the hands of Russian forces. This has been witnessed in Mariupol, Bakhmut, Lysychansk, Severodonetsk, Volvonakha, and most recently in Adviivka. This horrific pattern must not be perpetuated. According to the Office of the High Commission for Human Rights, Russia's full-scale invasion in Ukraine has already resulted in the death of 10,703 civilians, including 594 children. 20,146 more, including 1,316 children, have been injured. We condemn all attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure. They are prohibited under international law. They are unacceptable and must stop now. Mr. President, the Secretary General has emphasized in his recent remarks to this Council that territorial integrity and political independence of states are fundamental principles of the UN Charter. They are at the heart of our multilateral order. Therefore, the reports of the Russian Federation's plan to organize and hold its March presidential elections in the territories of Ukraine currently under its control are deeply disturbing. The attended illegal annexations of Ukrainian territory have no validity under international law, as also declared by the UN General Assembly. The United Nations remain fully committed to the sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders. Mr. President, today is International Women's Day. I wish to pay tribute to the courageous Ukrainian women and girls who, despite the unspeakable horrors they have endured, continue to work to support their communities and to build a better future for their country. Yet, economic turmoil caused by the war is disproportionately affecting Ukrainian women's livelihood. Their well-being is at risk due to restricted access to essential services. They face heightened risk of sexual and gender-based violence. We continue to work to ensure that the needs of women and girls are addressed in our efforts to mitigate the impacts of the war. We are also committed to partnering with Ukrainian women leaders and women peace and security champions to promote women's full and equal participation in decision-making, recovery, and peace efforts. Mr. President, the past 2 years of war have come with a heavy price for Ukraine, Europe, and the world. We must now not allow for this war to bring further loss of life, destruction, and suffering. In the Secretary General's words, I quote, "It is high time for peace, a just peace based on the United Nations Charter, international law, and General Assembly resolutions," end quote. The United Nations remain ready to support all meaningful efforts to this end.
Well, the Director of the Financing and Partnerships Division at the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, Lisa Doughton, said we continue to face significant obstacles to reaching everyone in need. But one of the most significant challenges remains the lack of humanitarian access to the parts of Donetsk, Kherson, Luhansk, and Zaporizhzhia oblasts occupied by the Russian Federation.
2 years and 13 days have now passed since the full-scale escalation of this war. The latest wave of escalatory attacks in Odessa, Kharkiv, Sumy, Donetsk regions over the past few days shows how the conflict continues to inflict immeasurable human suffering, death, and devastation on the people of Ukraine. We were particularly appalled by the strike on the high-rise residential building in Odessa City this past weekend that, according to local authorities, killed 12 civilians, including 5 children. The recent attacks have left many other civilians without electricity, heat, and water. Multi-story apartment buildings have been damaged or destroyed by the impact of the strikes in cities and towns in Donetsk, Kherson, and Dnipro regions, rendering thousands homeless and in need of humanitarian assistance. Amid still cold winter temperatures, this damage is threatening the lives of the most vulnerable in particular, among them the elderly and those with disabilities. Many of these people have had to remain in frontline communities and are already suffering because of the disruption to essential services caused by the war. The UN Human Rights Office reports that nearly 31,000 civilians have now been killed or injured since 24 February 2022. This prompts me to repeat that attacks directed against civilians and civilian objects are prohibited under international humanitarian law. Indiscriminate attacks are also strictly prohibited. Parties to the conflict must take constant care to spare all civilians and civilian objects, including infrastructure essential for civilians' survival. On this International Women's Day, while we celebrate Ukrainian women as instrumental agents of change and honor the incredible work of Ukrainian women's organizations, we should also note the particularly harsh impact of the conflict on women and girls in Ukraine. The UN Population Fund reports a third of households led by women in Ukraine are struggling to feed themselves, and 60% of older women are unable to provide for their own basic needs. An increase in gender-based violence against women and girls has been a shocking hallmark of this war. Tragically, a lack of sufficient resources to sustain and expand a network of medical and social care services means that many of the 2.5 million people at risk of being subjected to gender-based violence in the coming year, notably acute for displaced women and girls near the front lines, will not have access to the services they need and deserve. Mr. President, the UN and its partners continue to do everything we can to provide humanitarian assistance to millions of people across Ukraine. This is in spite of the ongoing and deteriorating security situation. So far in 2024, 2 humanitarian workers have lost their lives and 10 have been injured, highlighting the dangers of delivering aid close to the front line. We're grateful to the donors who've so far provided 11% of the $3.1 billion needed for the 2024 Ukraine Humanitarian Needs and Response Plan. This has enabled us to address the ongoing impacts of the conflict and provide life-saving assistance. But more financial support is urgently needed to sustain operations. In recent months, humanitarians have provided more than 1.7 million people with some form of direct winter assistance, including winter heating, repair and maintenance of energy and heating systems, and much-needed home repair materials. The commitment and endurance shown by some 600 partner organizations delivering a humanitarian response across Ukraine is remarkable. They are working in the middle of tremendous insecurity and danger to provide civilians with the services and supplies they need to see them through the harsh winter and beyond. So far in 2024, the UN and its partners have had to adapt their operations to stay and deliver to the people affected by the intensification of fighting along the front line, delivering critical supplies to the nearly 13,000 war-affected residents in the frontline communities through 11 interagency convoys. These convoys are a lifeline. Just last week, 2 much-needed interagency convoys reached communities in Kherson and Donetsk that have been heavily impacted by months of fighting. They delivered portable power stations, hygiene items, and other essential supplies. This interagency support is complemented by numerous deliveries from local organizations and volunteers. But, Mr. President, we continue to face significant obstacles to reaching everyone in need. One of the most significant challenges remains the lack of humanitarian access to the parts of Donetsk, Khersonsk, Luhansk, and Zaporizhzhia oblasts occupied by the Russian Federation. As hostilities continue to escalate, we're deeply concerned about the fate of the civilians in these territories whom we're unable to reach at scale. The consequences for an estimated 1.5 million people in need of life-saving assistance are unthinkable, and they are unavoidable. They are avoidable. As we have been stating repeatedly, under international humanitarian law, all parties must allow and facilitate the rapid and unimpeded passage of humanitarian relief for civilians in need, and must ensure that humanitarian personnel have the freedom of movement required for their work. This applies where civilians in need are located in Ukraine. Mr. President, the United Nations and its humanitarian partners remain committed to safeguarding the life and dignity of the people affected by this war for as long as it takes. But it has gone on far too long. It's time to bring the humanitarian catastrophe in Ukraine and the suffering of the Ukrainian people to an end.
We'll go for a net break. We'll return with our English news.
Be sure to catch Business Watch every Wednesday between 2 p.m. to 3 p.m, where we feature the latest updates on business news, market trends, and exclusive interviews with industry leaders, as well as insights on emerging small and medium enterprises in the commercial sector. Business Watch, your business leader.
sabatandi ukuthi njengalokhu sivile sive sithi khulumeni.
Welcome back. Let's look at the English international news. Russian President Vladimir Putin basked in a victory early on Monday that was never in doubt, as partial election results showed him easily securing a fifth term after facing only token challengers and harshly suppressing opposition voices.
After 3 days of voting, an early exit poll gave Vladimir Putin 88% of the vote, securing him 6 more years in office. It's the biggest landslide any president has enjoyed in post-Soviet Russia and is set to make the 71-year-old autocrat the longest-serving Russian leader since Joseph Stalin.
I would like, first of all, to thank the citizens of Russia. We are all one team of all Russian citizens who went to the polling stations and voted.
His vote share up more than 10% on his last re-election. The Kremlin's stated aim was to achieve record voter turnout to bolster the legitimacy of Putin's re-election, a success according to official figures. This after a campaign in which his 3 token rivals refrained from any criticism of Putin's record as president or his illegal war in Ukraine. But dozens were arrested in cities across the country over the weekend for acts of election day protest. And the so-called Noon Against Putin initiative saw opponents of the president's regime descend peacefully on polling stations at 12 o'clock, the queues a quiet show of dissent. An initiative launched by allies of the Kremlin's most vocal critic, Alexei Navalny, who died a month ago under suspicious circumstances in an Arctic penal colony. But his memory was fresh in the minds of thousands of Russians, as many chose Sunday to lay flowers on the dissident's grave, while his widow, voting at the Russian embassy in Berlin, was proud to tell press she had spoiled her ballot.
You are probably wondering what I wrote on the ballot papers, who I voted for.
Of course I wrote Navalny's name, because it just can't be that a month before the election, with the presidential campaign already underway, Putin's main opponent, already imprisoned, was murdered.
Calling the Russian president a gangster and a killer.
Ukraine launched a new wave of drone attacks on Sunday as Russians cast ballots on the final day of a presidential vote, which is set to extend President Vladimir Putin's rule for another 6 years. Now, in the border region of Belgorod, 4 drones damaged electricity and gas lines in one village. This was said by Governor Vyacheslav Gladkov.
Charred vehicles with shattered windscreens. It's the aftermath of Ukrainian shelling which hit this car park in Belgorod, according to Russian authorities. Residents were left shaken.
I live nearby. I heard the blast and ran out to see something burning. I ran up. The neighboring buildings were on fire.
In buildings nearby, some windows were blown out by the blast.
The sirens went off. My youngest child and I ran into the corridor in the first seconds. The blast started, and a missile flew past, then a bright flash, not very loud. Everything happened very fast. The doors flew open. The windows were thrown out.
The Belgorod region has become the frequent target of Ukrainian cross-border attacks that come in response to Russia's war in Ukraine. These videos released by Russia's defense ministry claim to show what the ministry says are Ukrainian soldiers attempting an incursion into Belgorod. The region is on high alert.
The situation is quite complicated now in the city and the Belgorod region. Of course, the main issue for us is security. Today, I will definitely try to give operational information on the current situation. We have decided that shopping centers in the Belgorod region will not be open on Sunday and Monday.
On Saturday, Russia's defense ministry said it had intercepted missiles, drones and rockets over Belgorod and Kursk, another border region. It comes in the midst of Russia's presidential elections, with Putin accusing Ukraine of attempting to, quote, disrupt his bid for another mandate. The president has promised a harsh response.
Thousands of Israelis took to the streets on Saturday in Tel Aviv to call for the release of the hostages held in Gaza. Now, anger continued to simmer among protesters who clashed with the police and blocked traffic as they accused the Israeli government of inaction.
Anger in Israel continues to burn. On Saturday, thousands of protesters once again called for the hostages in Gaza to be saved. Several were arrested among fights with police, while others blocked traffic in an attempt to get their message out.
We're here to protest this government that hasn't been acting for the majority of people in Israel for a while now, especially since the beginning of the war. Whether it's the hostages or whether it's creating more tension between Arabs and Jewish people, we think it's actively harming us.
We want this government to take us seriously, to quit, and we want that our country will be for the people and not for a small dictatorate group.
Israel says 252 people were kidnapped on the 7th of October attack, and 98 are still believed to be held alive by Hamas.
Shlomo experienced the Farhud Holocaust in Iraq as a child. He experienced things that no child should ever experience. How is it possible that at the age of 86, he needs to experience such a tragedy again?
Hamas has submitted a new proposal for a 6-week pause in fighting in exchange for the release of some hostages as well as Palestinian prisoners. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called the proposal unrealistic, while Israel sends a delegation to Qatar for further talks.
Airplanes flew over southern Gaza on Sunday morning, leaving a trail of aid crates falling to the ground in their wake. Now actively participating for the first time since the Israel-Hamas war broke out in the airdrops. Taking off from Jordan, Germany said its Air Force on Saturday dropped pallets with 4 tons of relief goods by air into the Gaza Strip.
Planes flew over southern Gaza Sunday morning, leaving a trail of aid crates falling to earth in their wake. For the first time, Germany is actively participating in the airdrops taking off from Jordan, with one of its aircraft joining others from Egypt and the United States.
Germany has long been involved in facilitating humanitarian aid to Gaza with financial support, aid supplies, and now also with the airdropping of aid supplies, which of course is not ideal. The best way to do this would be with more trucks via border checkpoints.
Sending aid by air has been plagued with technical snags, as it is difficult to control where the aid goes, with some of it falling into the sea or into Israel. The United Nations has repeatedly warned of looming famine in the Gaza Strip, as for months Israel had only allowed a trickle of aid to enter from one overland checkpoint via Egypt. In search of new avenues, aid organizations have begun delivering aid via a new water corridor from Cyprus to Gaza. Sea shipments arrived for the first time on Friday, with aid organizations warning that boats are insufficient to replace land routes. Israel announced last week that it would facilitate increased humanitarian aid. It let 6 aid trucks enter directly into northern Gaza in a test run to decide if it would allow more.
Niger's government announced that it was breaking off with immediate effect its military cooperation agreement with the United States. Now, the declaration came just a day after a senior U.S. delegation left Niger following a 3-day visit to renew contact with the military junta that ousted the president and moved closer to Russia.
Yankee go home. That's the message from Niger's junta to the some 1,000 American troops stationed in the country.
The American presence on the territory of the Republic of Niger is illegal and violates all the constitutional and democratic rules.
Niamey's decision to tear up a military cooperation agreement signed in 2012 follows a coup d'etat last July. With softer diplomacy than France, the United States didn't call it a coup until months later. And despite a visit from an American delegation last week, Niger has made its mind up.
We are aware of the statement from the CNSP in Niger, which follows frank discussions at senior levels in Niamey this week about our concerns with the CNSP's trajectory.
Niger was one of the West's last allies in the Sahel region. In recent years, the United States had begun operating a major surveillance base in the city of Agadez, built at a cost of more than $100 million. Washington hoped its pact with Niger wouldn't just be to fight terrorism, but also stem the growing influence of Russia and its Wagner mercenaries in the region. Not so. The junta's televised address name-checked Russia as an important partner.
Former Vice President Mike Pence says he will not be backing Donald Trump in the 2024 election. The decision makes Pence the latest in a series of senior Trump administration officials who have rather declined to endorse their former boss's bid to return to the Oval Office. Now, while Republican members of Congress and other GOP officials have largely rallied behind Trump, a vocal minority has continued to oppose his bid.
Mike Pence has refused to back his former boss, becoming the latest senior Trump administration official to do so.
And it should come as no surprise that I will not be endorsing Donald Trump this year.
After serving as his vice president for 4 years, Pence split with Trump over the January 2021 riot at the U.S. Capitol. Trump is sure to be the Republicans' candidate for president, but could struggle to win back support among moderate Republicans and independents, crucial in the rematch with Joe Biden in November. On Friday, a New York judge postponed Trump's trial over alleged hush money payments during his 2016 campaign, one of 4 criminal cases against him.
He has received a delay so far in his Washington, D.C. case. His Florida case is expected to be delayed, and his Georgia case has not yet been scheduled. Now, this case, which was going to be the first of the 4 cases to go to trial, is off at least until mid-April.
In the Georgia election interference case, a judge ruled the romantic relationship between District Attorney Fani Willis and her deputy Nathan Wade would prevent her from pursuing charges, leading Wade to withdraw from the case on Friday.
United States lawmakers reacted to a series of controversial remarks made by Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump on Saturday. And while Democratic President Joe Biden wasn't on campaign trail over the weekend, his re-election bid also made headlines.
Former Republican President Donald Trump made headlines for several remarks he made while campaigning on Saturday in Dayton, Ohio. One of them came as he was criticizing China's building of car manufacturing plants in Mexico.
We're going to put a 100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line, and you're not going to be able to sell those cars. If I get elected, now if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole. That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country.
Trump's campaign underscored that the comment wasn't about political violence. Republican Senator Bill Cassidy shared his opinion on the matter during an appearance on NBC's Meet the Press.
The general tone of the speech is why many Americans continue to wonder, should President Trump be president? Depending upon the perspective, somebody is going to interpret it. He's running against Biden, so Biden's going to say it's about political violence. His defenders want to defend him, and so they're going to say it's about economic disaster.
Ohio Republican Representative Mike Turner, who appeared on ABC's This Week, shared his views about Trump's comments, referring to some migrants as not people, and Biden's handling of illegal crossings at the border.
I, of course, have disagreed with those in the past. I think the American public disagree with those. But I do think that people see that Donald Trump is the only candidate in this race that's going to be able to fix this crisis.
During Saturday's campaign event, Trump also doubled down on criticism of Democratic President Joe Biden's economic policies and didn't leave out the sense of urgency when calling on Trump's supporters to participate in the general election.
I don't think you're going to have another election in this country. If we don't win this election, I don't think you're going to have another election, or certainly not an election that's meaningful. And we better get out, I actually say that the date, remember this, November 5th, I believe it's going to be the most important date in the history of our country.
President Biden's re-election bid also drew media attention over the weekend, with news that his campaign reached a fundraising milestone. It now has $155 million in cash on hand. Of that, $53 million was raised in February alone. The news broke as Biden prepared to host a brunch for several Roman Catholic leaders Sunday at the White House to celebrate St. Patrick's Day.
Increasing numbers of migrants are arriving in Ciudad Juarez, the Mexican city directly across the United States border from Texas. And that is according to immigration officials who say warm spring weather and the temporary halt to a controversial Texas law are driving the increasing numbers.
The flow of migrants north to the U.S. border has picked up again after a brutally cold winter. Venezuelan Gustavo Rodriguez is one of many on his way to Ciudad Juarez, just across from El Paso, Texas.
I'm traveling with my son and a female friend. We're helping each other because she has small children.
The rise follows the suspension of a controversial Texas law that allowed police to arrest and detain people they suspect of entering the country illegally. The law raised concerns of racial profiling in a state where 40% of the population is Latino. The U.S. Supreme Court extended a temporary freeze this week, pending review.
That is prompting migrants already in Mexico to start moving north again from places like Chihuahua or Gómez Palacio in Torreón.
González says shelters in Ciudad Juarez have seen a 30% increase in migrants over the past 2 weeks. Hopeful migrants with limited resources are making the journey on foot, trying to keep safe by staying in groups and not just on the road.
Tratamos lo más posible de resguardarnos, bien sea en el sitio donde nos están dando al ojo.
They have reason for concern. Many migrants have been assaulted, robbed, and killed on their journey north, and the danger isn't over once they reach the border cities. Ciudad Juarez, for example, witnessed over 120 homicides in January, according to the Chihuahua Attorney General's office. In response, the Mexican government deployed military troops to help quell the violence. But migrants say the army presence doesn't help.
En esta ciudad se nos hace muy
It's very
difícil, pues,
difficult for us in the
en
city
base
with all
a
that
todo
is
lo que está
happening with the
aconteciendo
different
con
organized
las
criminal
diferentes
gangs.
tipos de bandas.
Pastor Gonzalez says he is seeing disinformation campaigns encouraging undocumented migrants to make the trip to the border.
They are spreading the word for them to come, that they are opening the doors to let them in through a certain port of entry, which is false.
However, the desire to pursue a better life often overrides caution for many migrants as they hold on to hope of achieving their dream of starting anew in the United States.
For as long as the United States and its Western allies have been sending military assistance to Ukraine, Moscow has accused the West of using Ukraine to fight a proxy war against Russia. But as Maxime Adams reports, the reality is much more complicated.
As the fighting in Ukraine enters its third year, some Western allies are contemplating the possibility of becoming more deeply involved in its conflict with Russia. In late February, French President Emmanuel Macron refused to rule out deploying NATO troops to Ukraine. Former US Defense Intelligence officer Matt Shoemaker says it was Macron's attempt to push back against Putin.
He certainly wanted to send the message to the Russians that and put them on the back foot, if you will, to put them on the defensive that NATO might actually get involved. But unfortunately, since President Macron did not give an indication to his fellow NATO members that he was going to say this, it certainly put them on the back foot as well.
But another analyst, Sean Steinberg from the Sufan Center, says some NATO boots are already on the ground.
Well, it is true that there are, it seems that there are, NATO advisors, or at least NATO member states have advisors and, special forces on the ground in Ukraine. But I do think there is a huge, massive red line separating advisors on the ground versus US and NATO troops fighting directly against Russian troops.
Retired Vice Admiral Robert Muret, the deputy director of the Syracuse University Institute for Security Policy and Law, says US troops can be found worldwide, but that doesn't mean they're fighting.
Every embassy that the United States has around the world, every last one of them have a Marine Security Guard detachment. So we have Marines that do protection. So in small numbers, yes, there are active duty military personnel in Ukraine.
Ruslan Bortnik, the director of the Ukrainian Institute of Politics, says NATO deployment is inevitable.
Russia is a lot bigger than Ukraine, so there will either be a threat of Ukraine losing the war, or foreign troops will need to be sent to the country.
Bortnik believes that as an entity, NATO is unlikely to send troops to fight in Ukraine. But he says that individual member states like France, Poland, the Netherlands, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, or one of the Baltic states could choose to do so.
A post-flight inspection revealed a missing panel on a Boeing 737-800 that had just arrived at its destination in southern Oregon on Friday. That flying from San Francisco, officials said that the latest in a series of a recent incident involving aircraft manufactured by the company. While the plane landed safely without incident, a panel was missing from the aircraft's underside, where the wing meets the fuselage next to the landing gear.
It's another episode in the series of Boeing 737 mishaps. United Flight 433, which was carrying 139 passengers and 6 crew members, safely flew from San Francisco to Oregon Friday, but after landing, an external panel on the plane was found missing during a routine inspection before the next flight, prompting an investigation by the Federal Aviation Administration. The missing panel was located on the aircraft's underside where the wing meets the fuselage and right next to the landing gear. The runway and airfield were checked for debris, but none was found. According to the FAA, this plane is part of the series preceding the MAX and is 25 years old. The inspection follows another Boeing incident earlier this week, where a plane flying from Sydney to Auckland made a mid-air dive, injuring 50 people. Boeing has faced increasing pressure over quality control in its production process after a door plug blew off a 737 MAX 9 jet back in January. The FAA conducted 89 audits of Boeing's manufacturing procedure over 6 weeks to find Boeing failing 33 of them, with reports of 97 instances of non-compliance with the approved manufacturing procedures. Boeing responded to the audit, promising changes, and said it would work with employees who violated the company's production rules to make sure they understand instructions clearly.
The Netherlands picked French defense company Naval Group on Friday to build 4 submarines for its navy in a deal worth billions of euros that had also been pursued by Swedish and German firms. Now, the decision is a boon for Naval Group, coming 3 years after it abruptly lost a major contract, a contract to build 12 Barracuda submarines for Australia.
I am proud, and if I'm completely honest, also a little relieved that today I can announce who will build our new submarines. The shipyard that will build our 4 new submarines is Naval Group.
The Dutch defense minister is not the only one to be relieved. France wants to get as many prestigious contracts as possible. Its naval industry is still recovering from the submarine crisis with Australia, when Canberra cancelled 3 years ago a huge deal over 12 submarines, only to turn to the US and British models, a move that France described as a backstabbing. 3 international groups were in competition for the Dutch contract. This is why the government says it chose Naval Group.
They made the best offer, the best boat for the best price, and a strong Dutch participation.
No Dutch company can currently build submarines on its own, but lawmakers who will make or break the deal want to bring as much work as possible to Dutch industries. A group of MPs favors a Swedish-Dutch consortium instead of the French. The Dutch military say the French diesel-electric model would revamp their arsenal.
The weapon systems will be modernized, the way we communicate will be modernized. Basically everything we do right now will be done in a much modern, better way than we did in the past.
The military, though, say that more than the model itself, what's important is to get started with the building of the submarines to bring the Royal Navy up to speed as soon as possible.
Officials in Zimbabwe, Africa's largest tobacco producer, hope this year's crop will boost the country's ailing economy. However, demand is not as high as it used to be, and calls are growing for Zimbabwe to move away from tobacco due to health concerns.
Zimbabwe tobacco auction sales started Wednesday, with the government stating this year's sales will not reach the record $1.2 billion in exports achieved last year because of El Nino-induced drought. Vice President Constantino Chiwenga says tobacco is at the core of reviving Zimbabwe's moribund economy, and its production should increase in the next growing season when government meteorologists are forecasting better rains.
Government regards the tobacco industry as a sector that has great potential to grow and increase our country's foreign exports. Yes, we have got the other sector, the mines and minerals, but agriculture with tobacco currently at the helm plays a major role in our export earnings.
Kesina Mataya, a tobacco farmer, says she wants to help the government reach its goals of building Zimbabwe's middle and upper classes.
I like growing tobacco as it gives a lot of foreign currency, and I'll be able to buy stuff and prop up myself. If you're growing maize or other crops, you don't get good money, unlike if you're growing tobacco.
That's what most Zimbabwean farmers hope for, being paid in foreign currency for their crops given the volatility of the country's local currency. However, UN agencies like the World Health Organization and the Food and Agriculture Organization are urging farmers to move away from tobacco given the health hazards such as lung cancer linked to smoking. Because of those risks, Demand for tobacco has dropped in the last 25 years, according to the World Health Organization. Nevertheless, Zimbabwe's government wants farmers to stick with tobacco.
Tobacco is not the only product that's harmful to people. Sugar is harmful, alcohol is harmful, etc., but people still like it.
Peter Gambara, an independent agriculture economist based in Harare, says hemp production might be a good alternative to tobacco.
People are saying to flocculate tobacco has these harmful effects on the health of people. Industrial hemp, actually, the products are actually being looked for all over the world. They are required for its medicinal purposes. So we are saying that is an alternative.
Most Zimbabwean farmers have yet to try hemp production, as they say start-up costs are beyond their reach. That indicates a long time may pass before Zimbabwe moves away from tobacco farming.
That's it for our English news. Let's connect with Fabrice Msonera. We look at some of the sporting highlights from the weekend right after the break. Don't go anywhere.
Kude lesinye isikhathi ngaphandle kwalesi
abaresearche bafunze.
Being risky means ukuthi nalokuwa kwayo kulula.
Nathi kufuna sende ukukhicita lokusemndeni.
We are talking about disease X today and the priority list of pathogens. How does a bacteria or virus get on this list? And what do countries need to do to keep you safe from these pathogens? Here to talk about it is Dr. Ana Maria Henao Restrepo. Welcome, Ana Maria. Let's talk disease X. Is that a real disease that's circulating right now?
Well, I think the first thing I want to clarify today is that there is no a virus or a bacteria circulating right now that is called disease X and is causing disease. We are preparing for the future. So we are talking about an hypothetical disease. To give a name, the scientists call it disease X, to prepare for the hypothetical virus or bacteria that in the future can cause large outbreaks or epidemics or pandemics. There are many viruses and bacteria that can infect animals, including humans. For a few, we already have vaccines, diagnostics, and therapeutics. We know what are the viruses that we need to be alert to. We know what are the bacteria we need to be alert to, but there are many of them. So we need to have a simplified way to refer to them without knowing which one will cause the next pandemic, and we call it pathogen X.
So, Ana Maria, talk to us about the WHO priority list for pathogens. Why do we need such a list, and how does a pathogen get on that list?
There are many viruses and bacteria that can infect humans and animals in general. So how do you go about preparing for them? You cannot investigate each of them in clear detail, so you have to have a strategy to deal with it. This is why WHO has invited hundreds of scientists to work with us to try to identify which ones have the pandemic potential, which ones we know now, with the information we have today, can cause severe disease and outbreaks. We also have a list of the ones who are not causing severe disease and outbreaks now, but that may change in the future, so we have to keep an eye on them. So how do we prepare? So we do 4 things. First of all, we keep an eye. It means we have systems to monitor how they circulate among humans and animals, if they change, if they improve their ability to infect us and cause disease. Second, we have to conduct research to understand how they infect us, how our immune system protects when they infect us. That's critical because it leads to the third step, that is developing in advance vaccines, diagnostics, and therapeutics that can potentially help us reduce the risk of being sick, reduce the risk of having severe disease, and reduce the risk of transmission if they cause an outbreak. Also, we work very much on how to produce these vaccines and these diagnostics and these therapeutics when we develop them, how we ensure that we produce enough of them, use the technology to produce large amounts, how do we evaluate them to ensure they are safe and they are indeed effective against the disease and the severe outcomes that we want to protect people from. And finally, having this list also helps us to focus our collective efforts. You see, we share information, scientists talk to each other, we identify what we know and what is missing, and that way we maximize the capacity we have today to conduct research. In the end, what everybody wants to do and what the scientists wants to do is to help governments to be prepared. So if there is a new pathogen like we have with COVID, emerging, that we are better prepared, that there are less people who get sick, less suffering, less economic damage, less problems for the society.
Anna Maria, talk to us about the research and development that countries need to do now to prepare for a future pandemic caused by an unknown disease X.
There are several things that countries can do. From the research perspective, it's important to keep an eye out, to monitor which viruses and bacteria are circulating in their populations, in their country. That's critical. The second thing is to characterize those viruses and bacteria, how they transmit, how they infect the people, how they cause disease. The third point is contribute to your local, regional, and global efforts to develop vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics. And the last point is work together to ensure the researchers have the tools, the financial resources, the support to evaluate those products so that we ensure they are safe and they have the desirable effect in reducing infection and disease. And finally, collaboration and coordination is important. Collaboration helps us achieve our goal of getting vaccines, diagnostics, and therapeutics to be prepared for the pathogen X or for the next pandemic, whatever causes it.
Thank you, Anna Maria. That was Science in 5 today. Until next time then, stay safe, stay healthy, and stick with science.
All right, it's 39 minutes after 7. Next segment, Temidlalo with Fabrice Msonera, who has joined me in studio this Monday morning. Fabrice, a very good morning to you. Welcome to the program again.
Yeah, it's a very good morning.
Really, really interesting results across the board,
yeah.
You know, but I think the biggest anticipation right now, Sitlango Semnigati making headlines in terms of, you know, going to play against Morocco. And, you know, the biggest thing is that there's been some controversy around, you know, Morocco suggesting that they play both games there in Somalia, but the EFA is like, no, we also need to spoil our fans La Peka, and we want to, you know, clap hands for the EFA with regards to that. But, you know, just maybe a little bit of word on that, you know, and then we look at the NetBank results.
All right, beautiful stuff. Thank you very much, Sfiso, for the viewers. Once again, a very good morning. I like what you just did there. they want to play in Morocco. So the viewer might think they're playing Morocco. Then quickly come back, you're like, Somalia suggesting that, this guy, something good. No, virtue of Somalia not having a facility that is up to standard, so the game is going to be played in Morocco. It's Wednesday, by the way, 20th. They left yesterday, here the squad. There were question marks about players who were left behind because you can't take all the 27
They were left, and by the way, they hitchhiked going back home. Nine of them.
It was training on social media from them walking. We really don't know the agreements of the players. If you even give them pocket money to work, what if the players decided? But at the end of the day, there's no excuse. This is like a soldier. A national team player is like a soldier. Exactly. Because they are cars. Football Association have got cars. You could have just dropped them to the field.
It's a bad look.
It's a bad look. But it's a game. I'm thinking after what we did last time when we played them in 2021, if I'm not mistaken, we won 2-1 at home. Then we went to Morocco. To Somalia, we won 3-0. So this time around, I think nothing has changed. We seem to be upper hand in terms of who we are against Somalia. International players, Richards Pepe's, Justice Figueiredo, and Mthunzi Mkhondo from Mkhondo, beg your pardon, from Botswana also will be joining the team in Morocco. So I'm anticipating a good game. Gwakemse Trambabane Swallows, one of the key players. I think the future Sihlang captain, the experience, Xavi. And then I think these are the players, when you look at what they are doing currently in the league, then you have got that confidence that we've got all the thing, the ever reliable striker. I think so far, if we go for the records, I think he's the most kept Sihlang player. I think he's got, between 2020 and now. Nelly Swataiga, all these players, and then the forward, of course, of the team at the technical center. You can see even included the so-called new acting, assistant managers. On the left side of the screen, there's Sfiso Nurondibane. You've got the first one, assistant coach seated. That is Ernest Mavuso, who have now joined the team. You've got now Fagutse, the FC technical bench. So I think there's some boost. Let's see. But I hope, remember what they told us, that after this game, then we're going to get into the process of hiring the new coach, because that's what at some point the Football Association says. But the focus is on this game. They play in Morocco on Wednesday, like at 20. Then the return match is on Monday, on the 21st.
The team is ready, and that's
on the 26th, by the way.
And according to Coach Dominic, the team is ready. Minister Bongani Nzima said, "Do not lose." That was his message.
That's the
Just
message.
do not lose. And
Do not lose.
I think Simaswati Songa Shojalo.
I think that's the term he used.
Kungahlazi sekusenzakho ningadliwa bekunene hambani yofaka emandla.
No shit, don't make us, if we translate in Siswati, ningadliwa.
That's the translation. But that was very interesting. Round of 16 of the Nedbank Cup. 2 red cards in 2 matches, and this is becoming a trend now. But of course, we opened, on Friday, Chippa United and Ravens, Richards Bay, and Supersport United.
We didn't talk about the fact that I was spot on Friday when I said the so-called big guns, they will all progress to the next round. Look at.
And I'll give you that, because in the FA Cup you were very wrong. But let's start here. You were very spot on here in terms of, who would eventually qualify. And indeed,
Sundowns through, Temingos Lodge, after that move from Orlando Pirates to Mamelodi Sundowns, scoring a brace, and watching for Pirates supporters,
for him,
they didn't like it. Was seeing him just scoring goals. TSC Galaxy, former Kaizer Chief, Narkovic also on the score sheet as TS Galaxy. Saw the glimpse of Bernard Parker also being back.
Pirates fans don't care about Lodge if they are winning 4-0.
Remember they're defending champions by them. So winning 4-0, then they know what it means. So I was expecting that. Richards Bay, that's the focus against Supersport United. Our own Justice Figueiredo with that chance, penalty missed. But 3-1, that's the final score. So these are some of the results that I was expecting. Not a shock weekend when it comes to such results. So I think, when you look at the results, it's getting into the, juicy stuff. But the quarterfinals, I think, are going to be very interesting.
We will talk about the English Premier League very soon, Fabrice, but I want us to start with the FA Cup, and I want us to admit to Babugele Makha that we were wrong about Manchester United.
No. We didn't say. I wasn't wrong.
No, we were.
I said.
I wish we had downloaded so that we can.
We will get a chance.
See, now
I didn't say
Manchester United on a public platform.
Yes, I didn't say Manchester United will win the game. I say, looking at the history of both teams, like they are going to play, by the way, in the league. I say both teams will score. No matter how weak Manchester United, people say it might.
But we predicted a Liverpool win.
Yeah, we predict. That's a prediction.
And I told you we were wrong.
But I said both teams will score.
But I'm admitting that we were wrong. Why can't you admit
on your
that we were
side. Wrong? No, we're not wrong. That's wrong. No, but honestly, when we give a prediction, we look at it's based on the current form. Current form going into the game, you would think Liverpool had an upper hand.
And it's not what we
predicted.
But
for me, I said both teams to score. Okay. On your side, you're wrong. Yeah, but what a game! What a game! And I think it's now. Here's what I don't like, Swiss. I don't know if it's the media or us. You can't go 9 months crushing a coach about him not fitting into the team's agenda and everything. Then all of a sudden, there is a potential lifeline under Eric Ten Hag. Then you're not consistent in what you're telling us. Yes. Because after yesterday's performance, not only was maybe at some point Liverpool dominating, but these guys showed us a good game. If you look at what these guys are doing, Amadou Diallo, this young man from Ivory Coast who scored the 4th goal, you look at also the likes of, Garnacho, you look at all the players. So then you tell yourself that the coach now has so much belief in the so-called young players, those kids. Those are the kids that are giving the team results. And yes, both the likes of Mike Tomini also being on the score sheet. But what I liked yesterday is the consistency of the youngsters, the energy that they are showing. So, and I think going forward, we will stick to that. But potential winners soon, because now even the semi-final, there is a draw that has been conducted. So Manchester United will play Coventry City in the semi-final, and then you've got also Manchester City that is still in the competition.
Against Chelsea.
Against Chelsea that beat Leicester City.
And that is
4-2.
What a game that is going to be for Brisbane. Again, I'll ask you to make your prediction. Stop playing safe on both teams to score. Yes, that is pretty obvious. But I just want you to tell me which team's going to win so that you don't come back here and say, I was wrong and you were not.
I'm predicting Manchester Derby in the final. I'm not trying to say I'm looking down on Coventry. Yeah.
No. Manchester United, I would say, is beating Coventry myself.
But they stand a chance, yeah.
I'm worried about Manchester City. I don't know about you.
Yeah, no, I think they'll go through. I've never doubted them defending this title. We talk about the final who wins, but I think they stand a chance. I mean, now talks are there now that Liverpool, slowly, they're getting out of hand in terms of all the trophies they wanted to win. But I never doubted City are likely to defend this title.
So you don't think Chelsea sent a statement with that 4-2 win against Leicester City?
Not really a statement per se, but I would say...
Did you see that we scored a goal, and I said we. Did you see that Chelsea scored a goal in the,
Is that 13th minute?
13th minute, Chelsea scored a goal.
Is that confirming that Chelsea...
They had another goal on the 46th minute. It was just 1 minute added on the first half. They scored the second goal.
And Cole Palmer.
And then they scored 2 after 90 minutes.
Sterling came and also, it was a good game.
It's not going to be easy for Manchester City, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, it's a tough game. It's a tough game for them because at this point in time, you don't really look at the current form in the league. You look at who is doing better in that specific tournament. So I think it's going to be tough. Yep. And if you look at the history between Pep and Posh, whenever they have met, it's a tough game. But like looking on the paper, looking at the current confidence and the spirit within the Manchester City team, in my opinion, I'm giving it to City.
And maybe before we move on to the English Premier League, let's talk about Liverpool's, Manchester United obviously upsetting Liverpool, but what this means for Liverpool,
it means
during the game, a lot of even Manchester United fans weren't really hopeful.
They went through after Salah's goal before they went to halftime. You could say, now we're back to the story. I was actually praying that for my so-called supporter friends who are Manchester United, they don't concede 7 or 6 or 8. But it means now they have only won the Carling Cup. They're out of the FA Cup. They're left with the league and they're left with the Europa League. So let's see how it goes. So if they don't do well in the Europa League, then they're left with the league. If they don't do well in the league, so they still have 2 trophies that they can win. And I think in the Europa League they stand a chance, because I think there's the biggest guns in the competition, not to undermine other sides. But yeah, they've got what it takes. They can do that. But funny enough, these 2 teams are meeting again in the league, Manchester United and Liverpool.
Yep.
So Klopp has to be careful, because another defeat will give an advantage to either City or Arsenal, because they are meeting when they play. And yeah, but I don't like the international break, because we don't have that assurance that all these players, when they come back, they come back fit and teams. All the big teams have got players.
Right.
Liverpool has got players. Chelsea, City has got players. Arsenal has got players. So let's see how the story unfolds. But it's pretty much getting interesting. We're heading into April, the month that I remember Ferguson Gudson used to say, this is the month that tells you who's going to win the league.
And I think, let's go to the English Premier League. But before that, just congratulations to Manchester United for making it to the FA Cup finals. Yeah. I think they're already there. I'm not too sure about Chelsea and City. But yeah, these are the results of match day 29 of 38 of the English Premier League. In the absence of a lot of games that were postponed due to the ongoing competitions. West Ham played Aston Villa on Sunday, which was yesterday, but we started off the weekend on Saturday. And I would say the takeaway there was Tottenham losing to Fulham 3-0.
That's a heavy one. And actually, I was shocked to say both teams couldn't win. Even Aston Villa couldn't win. Yeah. And that gives a chance to Manchester United, who didn't play because of the FA Cup match, that they could add some pressure, because if they win their game, then they have 50 points. Then Tottenham are just 3 points behind them, above them. You look at Aston Villa, 56 after that draw against West Ham United. West Ham United, after that draw, they have moved an inch just in terms of points, 44 points. It's getting really tight, interesting, but obviously the true and the really reflection of the focus, it's at the bottom of the table. On top of the league, of course, there's also the focus with Arsenal, Liverpool, and Manchester City, who is likely to go home with the trophy this season. We look at Arsenal, but actually, I was actually doing the comparison to say, if Arsenal has got 3 players from England national team, Ramsdale, Saka, and Rice, then City has got is it Foden and Stones? That's 2. And Kyle Walker 3 as well. Then you go to Liverpool. There's Joe Gomez. There is the likes of Friend, of course, of injury. Then you start putting question marks to say, are these teams really happy that their players have read? Ben White for Arsenal, a statement came on Friday mentioning that really why he still doesn't want to play for England. He asked for the coach that he shouldn't be released. So I think it's good for Arsenal that they're able to keep him. But for other teams, like for Aston Villa, there's the likes of Watkins, all the players, Konsa, all these players, Maddison for Tottenham Hotspurs, Rashford for Manchester United, all of them making West Ham United also. Jim Proud was also part of the team. You go, all the teams seemingly have key players, and if you look at where the league is, then there's that worry that are they going to come back really fit and fresh? Because if you look at their friendlies, they're playing friendlies with 2 big nations, Brazil and Belgium. When you have Brazil and Belgium, because this is the last FIFA week. This is the last FIFA week before we head into Euro 2024 in June, July in Germany. So no one wants to lose their players. And every player also at the same point, I want to show what I've got so that I can play the Euros. Because after this, in April, at some point in May, the national team coaches have to announce the final list of players heading to the Euros.
It's going to be really interesting, but particularly in the English Premier League front, like you said, entering April and what that means for the league. Particularly, Arsenal will have a really, really tough test. On the 30th of March, they're playing Man City. Yeah. The game that was postponed, they were supposed to play, what were they supposed to play again?
So you say Arsenal, Manchester?
Arsenal.
Okay, Arsenal, because for them, they are already out of FA Cup. So they're scheduled.
No, I mean in the English Premier League. Yes, they're out of the FA Cup, but looking at the matches that they have in the English Premier League,
they have City,
and that they have to sustain that first position. It's
they have City, they have got Manchester, they have got City, they have got United,
that's a test.
They have got Tottenham Hotspurs, they have got Aston Villa, they have got Brighton. But I think if they can,
make it.
Yeah, they can make it. Because if you look at some of the games they have played in the past, they have showed character. You look at Manchester United, if they can stop, them, then you have to yourself, does that give a chance to Liverpool? But if you compare the three teams in the remaining 10 games, I think, Arsenal has got the biggest, round of fixture. And also, remember, they're still in the Champions League. Then City has also a huge, also round of fixtures. But at this point in time, I don't really look at the fixture. I look at who has the consistency, who is capable of doing it. And I think all the three are capable of doing it.
And Arsenal with the biggest advantage in terms of, just focusing on the English Premier League and not the FA Cup, when you compare them to Man City and Liverpool. But the La Liga, we have about 4 minutes left.
Friday,
Real
Madrid
Madrid
was on spot on.
Yeah.
Barcelona won last night
Real Madrid
convincingly.
Yep.
Madrid, of course, but convincingly after Barcelona, after that victory against Atletico Madrid last night, 3-0.
Fabrice, when we started the show today, I said, when all is said and done, Barcelona will look back at this season and really thank Xavi, for securing so many wins with this squad.
Yeah.
But Barcelona on the second position now after Girona's loss. As you can see there, they lost to Getafe. I don't know what's happening at Girona.
It's now getting where I once said that.
When the league started,
when I said, now when the big guns have to show what they're capable of. I wasn't really convinced that Girona can. I'm still not convinced. I'm not saying
you were the only one that wasn't.
I'm still not convinced that Girona can finish second or third. I think Atletico will take the position. But I think they can drop to fourth.
Atletico's going to take the third position?
Yeah, there's still more games. But I think they can drop to fourth if one was to be serious. Because you still have, how many? 10 games, that's 30 points. I still think they can drop to fourth, which is still an achievement. They'll play European competition.
And you think, as an athletic club, Atletico Madrid, that's going to occupy the third position?
Yeah, but when I'm standing, I'm like Madrid number 1, Barcelona 2, Atletico Madrid 3rd, and Girona 4th. That's how I'm seeing the situation.
I would kill to see Real Madrid lose games and just, Barcelona just miraculously becoming number 1, because no one is predicting that.
No one is predicting that, but you look at what both teams have in terms of competition. Both teams have got Champions League, they've got the league. So then you ask yourself, who is able to handle both of situations? But I think if you had to look at Xavi and look at Barcelona, the focus is not really on the league. Not to say they don't want to win the league or to play well in the league, but the focus really is on the other side, Champions League. They know that PSG is a tough opponent in the UEFA Champions League, but they also know that they need to maintain this position, but at least finish second in the league. But for Madrid, they know they want both. There's no room for mistake. They want both.
It's going to be very interesting. Fabrice, thank you for joining us on the program today. I think our parting words right now will be just wishing Sihlang Sebnigati a very, very, all the best.
Yeah, they're playing well. Somalia is worst ranked in terms of FIFA ranking. They're just far.
Yeah.
Then we're 142, 43, somewhere there. Then they are somewhere 170, going 180. So we can't really lose.
Fabrice, when they come back, where are we hosting?
Potential venue is the usual we use Bombela, and that's the current situation.
Maybe with this 2 minutes that's left, maybe I can, just a minute that's left, we can still a conversation on the situation at Soweto National Stadium. How's that looking?
We not anytime soon. Is there a hope that before we conclude the year we could host there? Yes, but at this point in time, no.
But in Ngwenyama Cup will be there. The final.
In Ngwenyama Cup, chances are we had reports that the venue was damaged. I think midweek, fences and the venue. But chances are 70 to 80% we should have the final there.
And it had to be. My prayer is that something be done. I was just looking at how packed it was, and some fans were standing. And, you don't want to see fans standing,
that's our mega stadium
on one of the biggest tournaments that we have in the country. Fabrice, thank you for joining us. We've come to the end of our program today. The 18th of March 2024. God has been so good waking up with us today. Have a good day.